Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Dickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Coleman Ford from the Village Church, Fort Worth. Appreciate you coming out today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Before we pray, a reading from God's Word, Psalm 27, verses 11 through 14. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they breathe out violence. But I believe I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you for this day that you have made. Lord, would you help us to rejoice and to be glad in this day, knowing that it is you who has given breath in our lungs. It is you who has allowed us to live, to move, Lord, to have opportunities to love others, to show, Lord, grace to others, forgiveness to others. And so I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would bring that spirit amongst us today, that we would have a spirit of unity, a spirit of mutual love and edification. And Lord, that we would trust you in the midst of doubt, in the midst of questions, in the midst of unseen and unforeseen circumstances, Lord. And so, Lord, we also think of those who, Lord, are suffering, Lord, who right now are going through trial and through pain. Lord, we are reminded that you are there, that you are present, that you have not forgotten, that you are not absent in the midst of those circumstances. We think of those around the world right now who are suffering due to natural disaster, due to other circumstances, Lord, beyond their control. But Lord, you, again, are not absent. And would you help us to remember that? Would you help us to remember that you are with the brokenhearted, that you are with those who are in need, that you care and provide for those who are without. And so, Lord, would we have that spirit as well? Would you cause us to remember the pain and suffering of those around us, in our communities, even in our families and around us, Lord, that we would be a vessel of hope, a vessel of love and peace, that we would be the ones who can minister to the poor in your name. And Lord, we remember that it is because of Jesus Christ that we have ultimate hope, that regardless of the circumstances in this life, that in Christ we have hope of eternal life, that we have hope of walking in the land of the living with you, our good and gracious God. Thank you for this day. We pray this in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Germanius, agenda announcements.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have several announcements relating to the agenda this morning. The first is under the Criminal District Attorney's Office. Item F1, we're going to ask that we hold this for 1 week. And Chris, was that just F1 or F2 also? And on item number F2, that will be considered after closed session today. Then also, members of the court, as relates to the briefing agenda, we're going to change that up just a little bit. And we're going to be considering item B, the hospital district capital improvement projects. That's going to be our first briefing, and then Mr. Hyder will be coming and making our presentation on item A. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Before, we do not have any resolutions, proclamations or resolutions, but I do want to take a moment and comment on a couple of things. One, Commissioner Fickus is not becoming a surgeon. He's not going back to school there. He told me I could violate HIPAA and just say he had some medical procedures, and that's why he's got his surgeon's cap on, or whatever that is that he has on today. And then also this past week, we had an opportunity to attend our National Association of Counties Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. There were a lot of great seminars, a lot of great things that went on. Commissioner Brooks completed his year as president. It was a super conference, did a great job. I know you're still on the executive committee for another year, but I want to welcome you to the ranks of the past presidents.
Thank you, sir.
And just say I think this whole court is very appreciative of your representation and what you've done for county government throughout this country. And I know your cause of poverty in that particular area was really furthered this year also. And so we appreciate very much your work. And I think we owe him a big round of applause.
I just want to thank you, Judge Whitley, and the rest of my colleagues on the court. I would not have been able to serve in this capacity without your support. You backfilled for me in places where I could not be because I was taking care of some national business. So thank you for the cover. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your guidance throughout the process, Judge. And I am thrilled to be a member of that very exclusive club of NACO past presidents. It was a joy to serve.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of July the 10th.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion to second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the consent agenda.
Move for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have two additional items to bring to you this morning. The first, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve an engagement letter agreement to retain the law firm of Thompson Knight as counsel to assist the Tarrant County Criminal Court judges in continuing to develop pretrial justice system enhancements consistent with federal, state, and constitutional guarantees. In fact, there's really two agreements in this. The first one is a 6-page agreement that we're requesting that you authorize Judge Ruben Gonzalez to execute, and then there is an additional 2-page agreement that the court as a whole through Judge Whitley will be asked to execute also.
So you have Judge Gonzalez in the back.
I'm here to answer any questions should you need it. I'm here to support Mr. Manus. He's in a good place.
We thought maybe you came with a bench warrant.
He's at ease at all times. I can tell. He's happy I'm here. Gentlemen, if you have any questions, we do seek the approval of the court. Obviously, we can't proceed without your direct permission to do so. But if you have any questions, I'll entertain them if you have any.
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Judge, thank you for coming
Thank you,
down.
Judge.
I appreciate it.
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
You know, he sneaks up pretty quietly on people.
Unlike Shooter.
Members of the Court, if we can go to item number 2, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve changes in the medical examiner's fee schedule, which become effective October 1, 2018.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Tidwell.
have one item that we're asking the court to consider this morning, and that is to approve the release of the $9 million collateral as listed in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Thank you.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Don't look like Mary Louise, but I think you'll make a good substitute.
Morning,
Good
Judge.
morning.
Commissioners.
Clint.
We're asking approval of a resolution to take over as the Vital Statistics Registrar for the City of Bedford, effective Monday, September 3rd. This already has been approved by the Bedford City Council on June 26th.
Great.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Glenn.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I made it.
Move to receive
made
and
it.
file the personnel agenda.
Thought I did.
You have a motion and a second to receive and file personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. At least I got some steps.
There you go.
Good to see you, Ms. Glenn.
Come on down, Vinny.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the court.
Good morning, Benny.
Public Health has one request before you for approval this morning. It is the agreement between Public Health and JPS for access to protected health information. It is called the CareLink Agreement, which will open up doors for us to access their Epic system. And also there has been an electronic connection made between the two EMRs like you requested a while back. That connection is limited data set. This will allow us to look into the detailed EMR.
Excellent. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vinny. Rachel. I'll just remind you before you get up here that he speaks after you. So just be careful before you get started.
Who is here?
Yeah.
Oh. I had an extra hog head you could warn if you next time you need one.
If I know.
Melissa's going to give our agenda this morning.
How were they rated?
Sir?
How was that team ranked in the pre-season poll?
For football?
How did they
LAST?
come out?
LAST?
LAST, last.
Melissa's going to give our agenda this morning, but good to see you.
We'll always take her over you.
I had a good time on vacation, though. I went,
Yeah, I
went to
know.
Key West. Little chickens running loose. I thought I was in Arkansas. It was great.
Go to Maui sometime. You'll find all those roosters over there running loose too.
We have 6 items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is RFP 2018-062, RFP for Case Management Solution for the Public Health Environmental Health Division. Recommendation be to award per the terms of the contract, awarding to Health Space USA Incorporated. If the court chooses to approve this, we're seeking contract approval also.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 2, another bid award recommendation for RFP 2018-088. RFP for Offender Defendant Paid DWI Education, DWI Repeat Offender Program, and Drug Offender Education Program for CSCD. A recommendation be award per the terms of contract, awarding Section 1, 2, and 3 to the vendors as shown in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3, also a bid award recommendation for bid 2018-124, starting a contract for the purchase of pneumatic compactors. Recommendation be to award on a per enterprise basis, awarding Section 1 and 2 to the primary vendors of short communique. Precincts 1 and 2 will be purchasing these units pretty soon.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Number 4 item, again, a bid award recommendation for bid 2018-137. Once again, the sale of our IBM Z Enterprise 1114 server and peripherals. We have a vendor to recommend for award, Data Management, in the amount of $1,500. They have 5 days to pay and 10 days to pick it up.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 5, item in regards to RFQ 2018-100, RFQ for environmental consulting services for both transportation and facilities management. Recommendation would be toward per the terms of the contract. We're seeking approval to conduct negotiations with the 3 vendors as shown when necessary.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Last item, number 6, an item in regards to bid 2018-122. This was a bid for Tarrant County Block 15 parking lot to the concrete portion. The bid that we received exceeded budget allocation. We are recommending rejection. However, we plan to utilize the interlocal that we have in place with Haltom City, and we'll bring the bonds to the court for approval next week.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Commissioner Johnson, you have an interlocal agreement.
I have several interlocal agreements. Have all of these been approved by the DA's office?
Yeah, Commissioner.
Move approval of items 7, F, 1, A through H.
I think it's
Second.
P. Not F, but I think it's P.
Okay, it is. I looked a little harder.
We have a motion and a second to approve items 7, P, 1, A through H.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments today? None. Then you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're going to go to item B under the briefing and talk a little bit about the JPS proposed bond package. Let me start, and Rob and I are going to tag team this presentation. As you know, we have been working on this thing, on this to do an analysis as to how we can best meet the objectives of the Citizens Blue Ribbon Committee. And when the Blue Ribbon Committee came together and made their recommendations, they had a listing of things that they thought were important to the hospital district and that would encourage the district to play a very active role in the provision of health care for our citizens. At the same time, we priced that particular those particular recommendations, and those recommendations were, and the pricing evolved around if we had to build all of those buildings as a brand new building. And so JPS, through their administrative staff and with some assistance from our staff, we have been working to refine how we would like to approach that. And so that brings us to a point where that we begin to talk about revenues that the district intends to bring to the table to pay for these projects, to look at other ways to accomplish the same thing that the Blue Ribbon Committee has indicated, such as the potential of public-private partnerships, the working in collaboration with our other healthcare providers in an attempt to reach the goals of the Blue Ribbon Committee and make the impact of our request to our voters to be as small as possible. And so we'd like to have a conversation with you today. You might remember last week that when we talked about this, we asked the district to come forward with a couple of different things. We asked them to identify funds in their maintenance and operation budget that they could bring over on a permanent basis to fund debt service. We asked them to come make a recommendation to this court as to their intent on how much revenue they can bring over from their cash reserves that would diminish the amount of bond ask that we would have for to our taxpayers, and then to discuss how we might manage this entire process. Now, before we begin, I'd like to say, or take you back to 2006. 2006 is whenever we did our last bond package, and that was a $431 million bond package. When we did that, we never intended to sell $431 million right away. In fact, your direction to staff was that now that we had the authorization from the citizens, now to go and to be conservative managers on how we move forward and accomplish the things that we had intended to accomplish. And we sold that debt over a 10-year period, and we managed it so that there would be an absolute no increase in the tax rate. And this is the same guarantee that we are making as far as the bond package that we were going to be proposing for JPS. It's going to be an absolute no tax rate increase bond package. And so we believe that the construction of this will be at least a 10-year period, and we will sell debt whenever the management and eventually this court decides that we can afford the debt and that we have sufficient monies to do the maintenance and operation. So when you look at a plan, a finance plan, our goal is to follow the same exact financing plan that this court has implemented over the last two bond packages that you all have approved. And the result of that has been that we held true to our word, no tax rate increase, and that we have managed the program so that we could absorb it in our operating funds. And at the end of the day, that we provided a quality product that our citizens were very much satisfied with. And that's the goal, what we're trying to do here and what we would lay out to you today. So I would like Robert, if you would, please, to just talk a little bit about the analysis that your staff has done in trying to determine how, at least a dollar amount, that we believe that we might need. I will tell you that at the end of this day, I'm going to make a recommendation as to the dollar amount we're going to request from the voters. Now, let me say this. That is not something that you need to decide today, but it's something that I hope that you would discuss and give us a little more direction. Okay? With that, Robert, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Manias. I want to first thank you all as a court for putting 11 board members in place that went through a process of their own analysis and their own dedication to the patients of Tarrant County that need the services that JPS offers. I want to thank you all as court members that you never lost sight of patients. When you start talking about bond elections and money and where you're going to go with it and what you're going to do, you can easily lose sight of the end user and the end need. And the end need comes from a patient. And to those of you up on this court, you never lost sight of that, and I appreciate that. Even with the debate, the discussion, the process, you never lost sight of the patient. And I appreciate that immensely. I also want to thank you for the addition of putting 11 quality board members that I get to work with together. Is you put a blue ribbon committee together made up of citizens that came over and looked at every aspect of JPS. There wasn't a corner, there wasn't an inch that they didn't see. And any day that they were there, they shook the hands of patients and they talked to patients and said, what is it that you see in this system that you need? What is it that we can provide? So I thank the Blue Ribbon Committee for all their work. I thank the methodical, practical nature at which they went through and the fact that they came up with, and it wasn't based on numbers, but they came based on need for about a $1.2 billion need. We think we can come off that number. We think we can do better at JPS looking at that, particularly with what Mr. Manias just discussed when you look at it over a 10-year period of time. JPS's last bond election was in the fiscal year 1984-1985. I think during that time period that no one could predict the place we are today, which is going to be difficult as to where we predict where we're going to go, but we're making the best decisions that we can possibly make for what's in front of us. So to that mean, we think we can come off the number of 1.2 and still be efficient and effective for our patients and deliver the services and the care that they need for today and for tomorrow. As we begin to look at issues that are gray to us now, such as the role telemedicine plays, such as the role of a reduction of acute care and putting it more into community care. The issues that we all face dealing with a huge increase of behavioral and mental health patients. Something that you can't deny, something that you can't walk around, and something that you as leaders of this community have said, JPS, you are our hope and our role for dealing with mental health patients. To receive 1,500 to 1,600 mental health patients a month is not something we dare turn our back to. We need to help those people because those people are my family members and your family members. They're our neighbors, they're our friends. They're not a nebulous group of people out there. So mental health plays such a keen role. The community standards that we need to set to get community care so that not everybody is inundating an emergency room for sporadic care and one-time care. Get them into place, changing people's minds about their health care. So the first thing I want to do is thank you all for the Blue Ribbon Committee and the work they did. And I want to thank all those members for their diligent time. I want to thank Charlie Powell for being in the audience and the board chair that he is and the direction that he has helped the other members of the board and what they have done. Trent Petty and Steve Montgomery that play keen roles in both our finance and our planning committees. And then we took Trent and we said, in addition to what you do on the planning committee, which takes all your time, could you please serve on the Blue Ribbon Committee along with Dr. Roy Lowry? And now, with your great luxury, having Dr. Steve Simmons, who is now a board member who served on our Blue Ribbon Committee, is such a great fabric that we appreciate. We've basically looked at three major areas. We see this as one package, but there are three elements to it. And those elements would be to address the behavioral needs of our community, which we cannot turn away from, to address the community needs, and making sure that in a population increase that you see over in the Arlington-Mansfield area, the population, Commissioner Fickus, that you see, and what we've done with the clinic that is there and will be up and running is an answer to part of this bond package. To you, Commissioner Johnson, and you, Commissioner Brooks, to those areas where we need to reach out to the folks that you ably represent and try to get them into health care, that's a key component. Because if we keep on the pattern we're going, you're never going to see a reduction in the emergency room. We had 67 patients, a new record for us, that we couldn't find beds for because we're full at the end. So we treat them in the emergency room and we treat them quickly, but then you don't have an available bed. That's a challenge. So we face that. We don't want to set a new record for 67 people who didn't have beds. It's a hard place to be. We don't want to set records for mental health that we have to keep turning to the private sector and pay the maximum amount that we can possibly pay to deal with those folks. And we need to step up to that plate, as we have historically done. But now those historic numbers are reaching epic proportions. So we look at three categories. We look at the need for mental health. We look at the need for community outreach and community health, which is mainstay to the main campus. And then we look at the practical aspects of the main campus and what you do with a facility that is older, that is challenged, with rooms that are challenging for our patients, and a flow pattern that doesn't sit well for moving patients from point A to point B. And you look at things that you have to do to run the foundation of a hospital. Also, JPS will commit to you all and to this community the best efficiency, productivity models that we can possibly do. And with that discussion, there'll be new things that weren't discussed in 1984 and 1985 when they passed the last bond election. And it'll be discussing joint ventures and collaborations with THR and Baylor and HCA and Methodist Mansfield that we had not discussed before, because those discussions weren't necessarily open or wanted, and we were and are and have been a siloed healthcare community, and that needs to stop.
And please don't leave out UT Southwestern.
Well, I was going to mention UT Southwestern because not only will I not forget them, is we've already made our efforts to reach out to the folks at Moncrief, and we've already put into place a collaborative effort between us and Moncrief that we see only growing. And we see that growing for a really vulnerable population. When you don't have a voice in healthcare and you wait till stage 4 cancer, it really becomes risky. We can help our people. We can reach out a hand of healthcare to people who don't have a voice, and we can get them and hopefully start stage 1 cancer and get to screening processes. So
I think one of the things that, along that same top line, I know that within the Blue Ribbon deal, there was some 30 million for cancer, and you have now gone out and actually leased a facility and gone into that, which will reduce that 30 probably by at least 20 and maybe $25 million. So I think, to your point, Commissioner Brooks, that's basically the lease was from the Moncrief Cancer Center. So that
it was, and I not only thank Moncrief and UT Southwestern, where I see a bright future for JPS and our patients in our collaborative efforts with them, but also the yeoman service at Dr. Keith Argenbright, who, wonderful for the fact that he was a resident at JPS, knows JPS, and has been a committed physician in this community, but that helped us put those things together. So when we talk about that, we may not have talked about that 6 years ago. Now, not only are we talking about, we're making it happen. And I feel the same with the leadership at THR and Baylor and HCA facilities and Methodist Mansfield. They're good folks, and they're trying to figure out what we do with the landscape of healthcare. And I think there'll be new answers that weren't available 3, 4, and 5 years ago.
Well, one thing that Commissioner Wynn has kept before the Blue Ribbon Committee and this Commissioner's Court, and that I've been preaching about since 2005 when I took office, was a more seamless, collaborative healthcare delivery system in Tarrant County.
Yes, sir.
And I think that this is a huge opportunity to take some steps forward in creating that, and the things that you've mentioned this morning give me hope that we are beginning to reach that ultimate goal of an integrated, seamless healthcare delivery system in Tarrant County, with everybody contributing their individual pieces to the overall effort to raise the level of health of our citizens.
Well, I'm passionate about it because I firmly believe that we stand at the beginning of something that will be phenomenal for Tarrant County and its citizens that need our care. And to add to that, Commissioner, I would add the higher education element and the work that Tarrant County College is doing from the standpoint of jobs. And wellness is just not a visit to your doctor. Wellness is financial wellness and a place to live, and a reduction of spousal abuse and all the other anxieties that one can have in a community. And then if you look at the economic development of what UTA is doing with engineering, and you look at the efforts of the University of North Texas and its research, and you look at the onset of the new medical school, you all have seen it. We want to be your partner in knowing where this community can go, and we are prefaced to do that. So this bond package will do just that. The last thing, it will be the intent of our board, and we will have more discussions about that. But to realize over a 10-year period of time, we want to commit to that financially the best we can too. We want to look at the ability to, over a 10-year period of time, our intention will be to bring $300 million to that table to help offset, so that people and the citizens know that if they're going to vote for a bond package, if they so get that opportunity, they know that they got a willing partner in JPS that says we're going to do everything we can to help make that possible. And so we're going to work hard to do that. But to Mr. Manius and his staff, he doesn't really take the credit for the amount of time that he has dedicated to this and orchestrated some of this so that it doesn't fall into pitfalls. Mr. Mania said to me this morning, we're spending way too much time together. And I do think that's probably a problem for him. But I will say that when I wake up in the morning and I'm talking to G.K. Manius at 6:45 in the morning, and 11 o'clock at night I'm talking to G.K. Manius, that is a challenge. That's a problem. And so I'm going to dedicate some of that time back to my wife, if you don't mind. Thank you. So I want to thank you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions as to where this goes, but your leadership has been phenomenal.
Yeah. I have one here on July the 12th. It was July the 12th. It was 5:08 a.m. So I think that may have been a butt call.
And
Who is it that you're claiming butt called you?
Yeah, well, I think it was GK, because he said, call me. I said, call me if you really need to speak to me, because I really think it was the wrong number.
Yeah, because he called me at that time. So.
If we can just take a private poll as far as the butt call.
thank you both for your leadership on putting this program together to the point where we've now got something we can deal with.
Yes.
So if I could, let me talk a little bit about numbers yet, okay?
Yes, sir.
Robert and his staff have done an analysis on what they believe as a minimum that they're going to need in dollars to implement the Blue Ribbon Committee recommendations. And that amount is approximately $975 million. I don't believe there's enough cushion in that. And that's why I am recommending several things. First of all, we know that JPS's intent is to bring $300 million to the table during the duration of the construction period, which is about 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Yes, sir. We've had conversations with JPS, and I've asked them as they move forward with FY19 budget, which you will see within the next 30 days, that they identify $10 million that we can use to initiate a sale of debt. $10 million will allow us to borrow $200 million. And I would suggest we do that as quickly as possible after the bond packet has been completed and approved by the voters, simply because interest rates are going up, and we want to capture the lowest interest rates. I'm recommending $850 million package, but I will tell you that there is cushion in that $850. And I am seeking direction from you as to what you feel is a number, because, first of all, it's no secret, this court as a whole is a conservative court. And whatever number that you believe, you feel comfortable with, is the number that we will take and make it work. So, Your Honor, I'm asking for some discussion by you and the court members about the 850.
Well, let me take a first stab at it. And I say this just kind of put things in perspective. The last time the JPS issued a bond packet was in 1984. I was 17 years old and was a junior at Holmes High School in Covington, Kentucky. That really put things in perspective for me. At that time, I was still learning English and receiving health care services from a public hospital in Covington, Cincinnati area. So the work and the mission of JPS is not just some public policy out there for me. Services like this help myself, my family, even D.T. Wynn, one of the JPS board members, survive through the tough years as we learn and integrate and adapt and assimilate to become American. So the services at JPS is personal. But I also have the responsibility as an elected county commissioner from Precinct 2 to make sure that we hold true to our promise and our commitment not to increase the tax rate. And that is a commitment that I don't think any of these court members take lightly. We are dead serious about that. We don't know what's going to hold in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And holding true to that promise is a whole lot easier to do with something less than 850. So I would recommend, I looked at the financials. Not only I looked at the financials, I spent half a day in the past few weeks at JPS, sometimes on the top floor, the 10th floor, sometimes on the ground floor, talking to nurses, talking to janitors, talking to doctors, unaccompanied and unguided by Mr. Early and his staff. The need is truly there. I firmly believe that. I have assessed the financial capability at JPS, and I looked at all the numbers, and I would be 100% behind this bond package because it is needed. It is not the end goal. The end goal is to improve health care and mental health status in Tarrant County. New facilities, more up-to-date facility is the first step. It is not the only step, but it is the first step. So it's really important when we take this first step, we'll be able to do so in a solid and confident way. So from my opinion, based on what I have honestly assessed, I think a bond package somewhere in the range of $750 or so is more manageable for us financially and for us to be able to hold true to our promise of not increasing the tax rate.
You had me until you said $750. I think you are right on target with every point that you made. It is imperative that we create a healthcare system in Tarrant County that is designed to meet the needs of all of our citizens going forward for the next 30 to 50 years. This court is absolutely and fundamentally committed to doing that without raising the tax rate, not even a tenth of a penny. No tax rate increase, none at all. But we've got some tremendous challenges that we face, not the least of which is to meet the mental health needs of our community. I think that is something that has gotten short shrift in our ability to meet the healthcare needs of our citizens. Mental health is a need just like physical health is a need. And to me, they are equal needs. And we have not, in my opinion, paid enough attention to the mental health need of that equation. And I think that this proposed bond program makes big steps forward in that effort, and I'm very, very, very pleased about that. I think when we started these discussions 2 years ago, our working number was $800 million. I don't see any reason why we can't do this program with that working number of $800 million going forward. It's a nice round number, and it's a number that I think meets the needs of both providing the kind of healthcare system that we need while keeping our pledge not to raise taxes, not one iota.
You both have great points, and Andy, what you were saying makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it's 750, 800. Mr. Manus has thrown out the number of 850, and I think that's based on what he thinks that JPS can bring to the table. I think another area that we don't want to overlook is the public-private sector opportunity that may be able to get us to a better number than 850. I don't know that we get the 750 or what, but we can, I think by looking at that end of it,
And, you know, those are things we're not going to be able to, quote, finalize between now and when we call a bond issue. But that's something we work on as we move forward with the program. Like we said, it's a 10-year program. There's inflation built, I'm sure, into these estimates. But again, we can only do so much at a time to keep from having to raise the tax rate, which we're committed not to do. But I think let's don't overlook the private sector involvement on things that the private sector might do better than us. Parking structures and maybe clinics outside of the downtown area where we might can lease something long-term versus to put out the capital. There's a lot of different ways to do these things. So, and there's, you know, always I'm sure there's plenty of private sector individuals and groups that would be involved in that. So I think it's a great start. I think we got 3 weeks or so to work over these numbers and come up with something that we can make a recommendation and vote on and take to the voters. So.
Yeah, our schedule is to, according to bond counsel, we need to have we have to have a definitive action prior to August 20th. Our last court meeting before then is August 14th. What my goal would be is to put this on the agenda for action on the 7th of August, because if there was any delay, that would give us an extra week to do then. And I might make just one other comment. I think that the 2 numbers that we've talked about so far are good numbers. And remember that we are asking for the authorization. That doesn't necessarily mean automatically that we would, in actuality, spend or sell all that debt. I think if you look at historically what we did in 1996, and then in 2006 or 1998, in 2006, especially the 1998 deal, there was some that we'd asked the voters to approve, but we didn't need all of that, and so we have not gone out and issued that debt. So that gives some flexibility. So Commissioner Johnson, do you have any comments, or would you like to?
Well, I can tell you that I have experienced JPS personally. Spent a couple of weeks up there as a patient, not visiting, looking around, but I talked to a lot of people while I was there. We have a great need at JPS. I think that probably Robert had recommended $975 million, I think. You mentioned 850. I've got Roy at 800 and Andy at 750. I think somewhere between 750 and 800 is something that I could support.
Okay.
You know, and I guess as I've kind of sit here and listened to everybody from that standpoint, there's a couple of things I'd mention. I think the mental health is very important. The community centers are extremely important, and that's something to keep in mind that we added. You know, where I think you mentioned that we were at 800 million before, and we were, and the board voted on 800 million, the hospital board. And since then, we've actually added, or the Blue Ribbon Committee has suggested that we add 4 community centers, as well as another 100 mental health beds. As I look, and that's included in that 1.2. So just random thoughts. As we go forward, we know things are going to change, and we can't anticipate what those changes are going to be. If you look back the last 5 to 10 years, the federal government has changed their funding models at least 3 or 4 times. Now, it's been about the same amount of money, but you had to do different things to qualify and to bring that money in. So I guess one of the things I'm going to count on and kind of bet on is that the funds are still going to be out there. We're just going to have to continue to do what is necessary to get those funds to come here. But it is very critical that we maintain our services, and just to remember, when we say maintain, our county is growing rapidly. And so if we're going to maintain the services and that population continues to grow, that is going to mean an increase in what we're looking at.
Absolutely.
You have already done a great job. I mean, you've already kind of gone out and started and saying, even though, we're not there, you've worked on the cancer. The Blue Ribbon Committee outlined several things that made up that $1.2 billion. And to the end of what you're saying as far as authorized up to, and I think that's what we're all saying is we're going to set an amount that we're authorized up to this amount to spend. I'd say that maybe as we do that we stay focused on those things that were recommended by the Blue Ribbon Committee. And I say that only because, as has been mentioned already, the last bond issue was 84, 85. Well, you got through that 50 million, was it 50 million, 34 million?
45.
45 million? You've spent a little bit more than that since then.
Yes, sir.
And I think that that's something that we've got to keep in mind also, that there is going to be other expenditures made. There will always be some expenditure that is needed. I would hope that whatever we decide on the bond issue, I don't want to be too restrictive, but I'd say let's kind of keep it within the framework of what the Blue Ribbon Committee has indicated, and know that, I mean, when you really look at it, we're talking about three things, and you outline those very well: mental health, community health, patient care. And I think that that's what we're all about from that perspective. You indicated, Mr. Manius, that $10 million of debt service would buy about $200 million worth of debt. That's current.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So if I go out and if I looked at 800, because that was easy in my little simple head to do, that's about $40 million in annual debt service, I think.
Yes, sir.
And right now, a penny of taxes raises probably about 18 million.
Yes, sir.
So that should say that if we were doing everything right now, we'd be talking about 2.25 cents. So can we move 2.25 cents over from operations to debt service right now? Well, we can, but that's not what we're proposing to do either.
No.
And what we're saying is that over the life of this bond issue, at some point, if we were around the 800 million range, that, what we're talking about is either 2.25 cents moving from operations over, and a lot of that's going to happen out of appraised value growth and out of new construction. When I say appraised value growth, everybody immediately goes and says, well, that's my house. Well, no, in Tarrant County, that's really not your house, because we have so much new construction, both commercial as well as residential, every year. And as long as, I'll get a little snarky here, my wife says don't get too snarky, as long as the legislature doesn't do anything that shuts that growth down, then I think we will continue to grow. We've got great potential here. So I guess I say all that just to say that I feel comfortable with their ability to go out and work other deals like the cancer deal you've worked, looking at public-private partnerships, which we've talked about. You mentioned parking garage. There's, there may be others that I agree with Commissioner Johnson. I think somewhere between that 750 and that 800, maybe we split the difference at 775, not 25. don't try me on there. But that may be, and I say all this just to simply say that would be authorizing up to. And again, what I think we're trying to do today, between now and the 7th or the 14th, y'all don't have a hospital board meeting, but you do have a finance committee meeting. And so hopefully you could take back to your, we can begin to get some feedback. Charlie, I, as Robert said, I want to thank you very much for what you've done, for the fact that you show up at these meetings. I know you have a bank to run. or that your shareholders wishing you were running. And we appreciate that very much. So, I think we really do need feedback. And so what we've said is we've heard from 750, we've heard to 850, and we've heard just about every number in between. And so talk with your folks. Let us get some feedback from them, and we'll, I'm sure, be, mulling through this and any other ideas that we've got between now and the 7th, which is two weeks away.
Still 2 weeks away.
Still 2 weeks, still all of 2 weeks away.
Yes, sir.
And 3 weeks before we absolutely have to make a decision from that standpoint. The one thing that I would say for anybody out there, if you haven't heard it from everybody, we're not raising the tax rate. Come hell or high water, we ain't raising the tax rate.
Amen.
And so, we can hear estimates as high as 850. I don't think anybody would suggest that we would entertain anything over that. And I'll just say that we've heard as low as 750, and whether we go below that is probably equally doubtful. But anywhere in between, as we're having meetings and discussing that, I think that's the range that we're sitting at right now. And so I think we've had a great discussion about this, and I think we've given everybody an opportunity to hear what we're in. The collaboration, I think, is very important too. I attended a kind of a walkthrough of our new FQHC that Commissioner Johnson is in your precinct. They're on right off Jacksboro Highway. It's going to open up in September. I know they're already doing some partnership work with y'all. I know you have a resident that's working out of that. I know they're doing work with THR. Those are the kind of things. The lady who's the executive director there now was from Boston, where they originally started these things, and they were called neighborhood clinics and are called neighborhood clinics in Boston. And, I think that it's a great place to collaborate in how to build community health and to really begin to look more at preventive. And I've heard you say many times that prevention is one of the things that we need to be looking for. So I think we can continue to collaborate. We can make this thing go, and we'll catch up with. We won't catch up with our mental health need, but we'll make at least a dent in what our mental health need is.
And let me add one more comment, and I want to share this with the court. With your agreement, I met with Public Health, MHMR, JPS, regarding mental health. I also met with several police chiefs around the county. And the consensus thus far is that we have to do more than just expanding our capacity. We have to get to the front end of this issue. As you can tell, it's very complex because we have to work across multiple jurisdictions, multiple entities. But it seems to me that the school districts and the police chief said they need more help. They need more support in educating their counselors, their teachers, their students about what mental health is. We heard from public health and many individuals about the public doesn't really understand what mental health is. We know what the symptoms of a cough or a fever or a cold is, but we can't tell what are the symptoms of a potential health issue. So in the future, we're going to have to do something to improve the awareness and inform the public about mental health and what are the symptoms and what we should do about it. Okay. So all these preventative measures, first of all, they're highly complex because we kind of have to shift our paradigm a little bit, and we have to work across jurisdictions and dealing with very different interests. Second, it costs money to do this. And it's hard to invest money into something that is intangible. It's hard to get support to invest money into something that is intangible where people cannot see, feel, or touch. It's much easier to do so with capital improvements and buildings and so forth, even though that in itself is tough. So as we ponder about the size of this bond package, I want to share a personal observation. Every dollar we put in a building, even though it serves a great purpose, we will have less money in taking care of the patients and dealing with preventative care and so forth. And somehow we have to find a balance among those interests and those priorities. It will take money to improve the public awareness about mental health. What are the symptoms? How do you get help? If your teenager at home is acting irrationally, how do you do that? To provide some sort of a crisis center nearby some of the police centers so that they can take people there instead of having to drive them all the way to the hospital district. All those things cost money. It will take money to really get to the front end of all these issues. And I just want to make sure that we don't forget about that intangible variable that is so much a very important piece to the overall solution.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think the attitude toward mental health is changing. People are becoming more aware of it. Unfortunately, it is because of some of the catastrophes. That's not necessarily the word to use, but we've still got a long way to go. 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was, I won't say nobody, but the vast majority of folks did not really believe in mental health issues. It was suck it up, just go on, it's all right. You just need to work yourself through it. It's not helped by the fact that insurance companies, to a great extent, have always believed that it's like any other cold or disease you get, that in 2 weeks you ought to be able to cure it. And if it takes more than 2 weeks, too bad. We're going to go forward with it, and that's where we're going to be. And as you kind of indicated, it's also the symptoms are not visible. If you got a fever, you got a cough, you got a broken leg or whatever, it's something that's very visible. People can see that and they recognize that. But mental health it's just not that visible, and therefore it lends back to well, that's not really a problem. Just suck it up and get back to work. Ain't got time. And I think we're beginning now to realize that it is not something that can be cured in 10 visits. Hell, I think chiropractic get more visits than what mental health get. So I think that those are some of the things that we've got to recognize, and I think we're moving in that direction. We still have a long way to go, and it's something that this is at least an indication that we're recognizing that it's a problem, and that we're going to make an effort to do it correctly. Because there's plenty of organizations out there that are not doing it correctly. And I think we owe, as you've said often, we're about the only emergency facility in the county. When it comes to that, and as a result of that, we get everybody in our emergency room. And oh, by the way, we get everybody in the surrounding counties in our emergency room with no reimbursement in most instances from that. So there are some things that we need to do legislatively, I will say that, where we need to be able to address those folks from outside of, at least from outside of our county, who are coming into our facilities and with no reimbursement whatsoever. So there's a lot of stuff to do. I think this has been a very good, and Mr. Manus, I want to thank you and Robert very, very much for the effort that y'all put forward to bring this to us. Charlie, again, I want to thank you, and I want to thank your board, and I know that your finance committee, your executive committee have all worked very tirelessly, as well as your whole board on this, and we appreciate everything y'all have done.
Thank you. And I won't come up here, but on behalf of the board, I say thank you, whether it's the comments from Commissioner Wynn, Commissioner Brooks, and all your comments today. We certainly support you, like us, supporting the mission of JPS. So thank you very much on behalf of you.
So we'll go ahead and keep this on the agenda, and hopefully we can come to some type of final agreement. We'll be working with JPS over the week, and we'll be back up here next Tuesday.
So do keep it on the briefing agenda so that if next week we decide we want to speak to it to some degree or have any conversations among ourselves, that we'll be able to do that as we progress toward the 7th.
Very good. Now we could go to the other briefing item. This is item number A, which is a countywide polling place program option for conducting elections. Mr. Garcia is here to address the court at this time.
Now, I might add, just as he approaches, that we had an election board meeting. I had to be careful because we got 2 of those committees running around. We had an election board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and he made this presentation. The members of that committee are myself, Mr. Hyder, the 2 party chairs, and the sheriff.
Correct.
No, the county clerk and the tax assessor collector are members of the election commission.
Okay.
Just to kind of help, just so you understand, the election commission hires him and recommends that we terminate him. Just thought I'd throw that in case you've forgotten that. This board, the court, approves sets his salary and then has to approve his termination should the commission do that. The board, the election board itself, is responsible for supplies, is responsible for the elections and making sure everything kind of happens with that regard. And it's very confusing.
Thank you for explaining that.
And so that's why, just to know that we have had that conversation before the election board. Both party chairs were there, and we felt like that was the absolute critical part of this deal, that the parties be involved in that process. And with that, I'll turn it over to.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The item I bring today is a briefing item. It's a possibility that we would like to explore the elections department for the county, and it's known as the Vote Centers program. I'll try to keep us down to the 10 minutes I promised, and I'm going to tell you what it is about, why we feel that it is worth exploring and considering, and shall we decide to move forward, then what would the timeline look like? So what are vote centers? In a nutshell, vote centers are about allowing people to vote anywhere in the county on election day. That's the general concept. Now, we've clearly talked about this morning how we have networks nationwide. So vote centers have particularities in each state, and I don't want any confusion with that, so I'll tell you in a minute what Texas are about. But the general concept of vote centers is about offering options. This is the traditional model. We take the county, we slice it up in precincts, geographical regions. In each one of those precincts, we locate a place where we can hold the election, and we tell people to come into the polling place. Vote centers acknowledge that you have a life outside the precinct, and they're about letting people go outside of the precinct. You take your kids to school, you go to church, you go to work, you visit your family in the county. And so the fundamental idea is, this is your map of options right now, one polling place. This is your map of options with vote centers on election day. Go anywhere in the county. And all illustrations here are just for representation. None of those dots are accurate proposals or anything. But that's a concept. Give options to people. What is a vote center definition in the state of Texas? It's known as the countywide polling place program, and it only affects the way we do elections on election day. In some other states, they talk about all-mail ballot, other things. None of that is contemplated in Texas. Someone very wisely said, You can illustrate it as an extension of early voting into Election Day, the model where you can go anywhere. That's pretty much a way to summarize it in Texas. The law says we have to use DRE, direct recording electronics, if you choose to go to vote centers. And the reason I'm highlighting that is because I want to remind the court that we are about to go into a purchasing process for new voting equipment. And what we want to know is if this is something the county is inclined to exploring, that we must consider that when we buy the voting equipment so we don't limit ourselves in the future, shall we decide to adopt this program. And then the law also regulates how you downsize the number of locations. So in the vote center model, you're allowed to have less locations. And this is a key part. It's not mandated, it's allowed to. And so in the first year, you could downsize to 60% of locations. And then once you get approval by the Secretary of State that the program is successful, you can downsize to 50% of locations, no less than that. And that number, 50, 60%, is compared to the last similar election. So right now, in the November election, we have about 360, 370 polling places. We could go down to 60% of that on the first November, and then down to 50% of that every election on. The other important consideration or particularity of the Texas Elections Code is it requires to have a balanced number of locations in commissioner precincts. And it says you must not have less than 50% of any other locations when you compare two commissioner precincts. So in this example, just to illustrate it, we wouldn't be able to do this because 8 is less than half of 18. So to correct it, we would have to add 1, and now we would be in compliance with the law. I believe this is a clause the law has to balance, to avoid any kind of favoritism towards one region, but also to acknowledge in some rural areas you may have less locations. But that's the other particularity in Texas. That's what they are. Why do we think it's worth exploring? There's 3 main arguments here. One is increasing customer satisfaction. Second one is reducing errors and boosting turnout. And the third one is reducing cost, saving money. The concept is by making it more convenient to people to go on election day and vote, they have a better experience, they tend to come back. It's easier. People don't think of it as a process that is difficult to go through. They will start to think of it as something that's easy to do. These are the counties that are doing it right now in the state of Texas. Last I checked, I think it was 22-point-something% of the counties. Travis County, one of the big 5, is in there. And 3 of our neighboring counties, Colin, Hood, and Parker. So voters in Tarrant County are actually aware, some of them, they have families around, they know that this is an option. And some of them have even asked, that's a real conversation on Facebook, a voter who mentioned, will almost be as cool as Cullen County because they can go vote anywhere on election day. So there is awareness that this is an option out there. What you see in other counties in Texas who've done this is that people find it convenient because they can go anywhere. And remember that in our state, you don't have one single polling place based on registration. In November, we have 370 sites. In May, we may have 170. So your polling place may change from one election to the next. By allowing you to go anywhere, we make it easier for people, or that's been the constant feedback that we've seen in other counties. Right now, almost 50% of the county votes in person on early voting. And I'm pretty sure that the convenience of the location is a big, big factor in that number. Reason number 2 was boosting turnout. Right now, we reject about an average of 35% of provisionals because the voter went to the wrong precinct. Those would automatically count. There's no more wrong precinct. So besides the potential subjective effect of we like this, there's an actual fact right there that would automatically increase the number of ballots we can count. And the third reason was saving money. There is the general experience out there in other counties, in other states, is that you save money with this. And there's 2 ways to save money. One is the operational cost. We believe right now this is our average expense. We believe this is our setup right now for a polling place where you can process about 1,500 voters. We have 5 poll workers that cost about $850 for the 14 hours of operation and the different pay rates. We believe that if you combine 2 of these places and serve up to 3,000 people, you can do it with the same 5 poll workers. Same cost, double the amount of people served. Just a rough number on it, this year, that would have translated having half the poll workers in those 3 elections, almost $300,000, not paid in salaries and wages to the poll workers. And that still have to add site rentals, logistics savings, trainings. It's basically about putting locations where you get more people concentrated and getting more out of the time of the poll workers. And that's how you come with that. And again, the trend nationwide is you don't see any decrease in customer satisfaction in voters. You don't have a worse experience by doing this. The other potential area for saving money is equipment cost. Like I said, we are going to enter a purchasing process this year. And so rough numbers, again, we haven't done a down to the penny analysis, but 3 potential scenarios. If we choose to go vote centers, I estimate we would be spending around $9.5 million. If we say, let's not go to vote centers, but let's buy equipment that will allow us to in the future, we spend a little more. If we decide that we want to buy equipment to have the same precinct model that we have right now, and we don't want to explore the vote centers option, it certainly is cheaper according to those numbers, and it's about $6 million less in buying the equipment. But the fine print in the contract, you have to add the $300,000 in manpower. We have to print ballots. We have to incur more logistics expenses, et cetera, et cetera. It is starting to look like we would end up spending the same $6 million over the 10 or 12-year lifespan of the equipment.
If you would, please go back one slide.
Yes, sir.
So in that number right there, you're saying vote centers, and you're showing 200 sites, and you're saying we're at about 300 and what right now?
70.
370. So that would be too low to begin with. If we started with 400 sites.
Right. We haven't gotten to 400 sites on a November election. I did round numbers.
But if we were to take the, I will tell you that one of the things that was said at our election board meeting by the 2 party chairs is that maybe not to come down. Both of them were supportive. There was one that basically said instead of coming down to the full 60 to begin with, that maybe we gradually move toward
60.
The 60%, or even down toward the 50 after the deal. So I think in your vote center model there, if you're suggesting 200, that's getting pretty close to the 60% because you were at 370. And so if somebody does a quick 370 times 0.6 is 222. So we're going to need to we would need to be higher than that. But again, that you're saying that we could do the 200 sites for 9.4.
I don't have
budgeted. How much have we got in our budget right now for election?
14.
So in effect, we're okay as far as what we have budgeted to be able to go above the 60%. Not quite, we couldn't do 100%, and we won't do the whole thing, but it gives us that availability.
Right. And remember, these numbers, they're not official quotes from any vendor. We haven't engaged in any, but we know their list prices. We know their contracts from other counties. So I did prepare these numbers with approximates. We have to go now into if we feel that this is worth exploring, then we have to go down into that real down to the penny analysis and come back at a point where it's not a briefing but an action item for the court.
In general,
sir?
In general, I'm supportive of the concept. The devil, of course, is in the details of how you implement it, how you select sites.
Correct.
My overriding concern is that this not have the effect of suppressing the vote anywhere in Tarrant County, in any community. If we can go to a system like this and ensure access to everyone equally, then I'm all for it. It will save us money. It will save inconvenience for our voters. It even has the potential, if done correctly, to boost voter turnout. But the caveat is the phrase, if done correctly.
Correct.
Devil's in the details.
Correct. Like any option, any wrong implementation can completely override the positive effects.
But you did say that in the places that you reviewed this, that it did it increase voter turnout?
That's been the general experience in counties. Like any matter, when you talk about averages, somebody can give you an example of somewhere where it wasn't well done. Someone will give you an example where it was. But the general average consensus is it increases both turnout and satisfaction with the experience. And as Judge Whitley was saying, Travis County actually decided not to go down, but I think they implemented 100% of the sites in vote center model, and they're downsizing as turnout decreases. And it's a natural habit. People will find the location that's more convenient. You don't have to know where to go. Now, at this point, you start saying, the one by my gym is always open. I just go there. And that starts building concentration points of turnout, and you start dropping the ones where you see the low turnout. That's another technique that can be used.
That's a market-based solution. That's kind of elegant.
It is. Again, it's balancing the potential savings and the convenience of the locations.
Can people still vote with paper ballot?
This is independent of the kind of technology. You can have paper ballot, DRE. There are details on what kind of technology we have to consider, but there is an option to do it with a paper trail. And so the last item I wanted to show you was what would the timeline look like. This is today, July 24th. If I walk away without any sense of no way in doing this, which I'm feeling like that right now, we would have to, by law, form a citizens advisory committee. So we would publish notices, invite people. There is no definition in the law. Parties, any groups, anybody who wants to be in the committee can be. And the basic mission of the CAC is to advise on the selection of locations and the methodology for implementing this. Then the law requires that at some point before you vote whether to approve this or not, there is a public comment session in court. So I'm thinking we can do that on September 4th, but before we do that, I would love to work with your offices in trying to do events in each one of your precincts where we talk to people, get some of that feedback, provide it to the CAC, and then come here in September and do the public comment meeting session for people to tell the court what you think about it. And if all goes well, mid-September, we would be bringing it up as an action item for the court to approve. And that's my item today. So if we have any questions.
My feeling about this is like my feeling about redistricting. The Supreme Court allows all kinds of shenanigans to take place for partisan political advantage. I don't want to see that principle applied to this.
Well,
nobody gets partisan political advantage if we do this.
But I'm also assuming that, and this may be, well, I mean, this would obviously be a vote of 3, at least, and we do most everything in here unanimously, but you set out certain requirements as far as the numbers go. And I would suspect that within each one of your individual precincts that you will have a great deal of influence over where those locations might be, and that we would do everything within our power to maybe percentage allocate out the way your precincts are set right now. Like if Commissioner Johnson has more precincts than anybody else, he might have slightly more early voting locations, but we would be moving. And again, I think it's a matter, I would be looking for something probably below 80%, but something certainly above 60%. And I'm going to also suggest to you that I would be very attentive to the requests of the party chairs as we look at what that percentage would be. Now, when you talk about your citizens committee, Citizens Advisory Committee, one of my initial thoughts is okay, Hyder would be on there and we'd have each one of the party chairs, but we can't do that. And the reason we can't do it is because that creates a quorum of the election board. So we've got to figure out, and we're going to have to do something with this as we look at our setting up that committee, that Citizens Advisory Committee. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you, September 4th, that's a very short fuse in order for us to get town hall meetings in each one of the precincts.
Correct.
And so I'm all supportive of doing this and going forward with this. I've heard no complaints as I've talked with other county officials around the state who have implemented this. I've heard no one just raise their hands and say this was a disaster. Again, this is not putting anything online. The only thing right now that we have online, therefore accessible to potential hacking, is our poll books.
Electronic poll books, correct.
That's right.
And that's the only thing. And
Correct.
so don't in any way, shape, or form believe that by doing this, that we're putting our system of votes to be potentially hacked. With regards to the equipment, and Hunter mentioned this also, we've got 2 vendors that I believe are certified right now.
Correct.
And a third may be certified by September.
I haven't heard if they have applied or not, but there is a third one who has old technology unless they certify something new.
There's HART, there's ESS, and there's Old Dominion. And so I think, again, part of the decision that probably more the election board and then ultimately this court will make is which equipment that would be used. And your question with regards to paper ballot, that's where that decision will be made.
Correct.
With regards to the equipment. The vote center part of the deal will just be that says we're going to this, and then we'll decide whose equipment that we would be utilizing to go to the vote center from that perspective. So it's a 2-step process.
Correct.
The first step is, do we go to the vote center? And what you're saying is you want that decision by September the 4th. And then if the decision is we go to the vote center, then at that point in time, you'll begin looking at specifically what equipment you're going to purchase.
Not really, because it would be too late. We want to publish the RFP in September. Right now, we have a draft of it where we're leaving open the clause that says your equipment must be compatible with both the precinct and the vote center model, and that doesn't limit the technology. Now,
well, I can see you going out for an RFP by
right.
September. Are you wanting to get the RFP in, evaluate, and make a decision when?
By late October, the latest.
Okay, so again, that's what I'm saying. We will decide to go to the vote center.
Right.
There'll be an RFP that you'll work with Jack on getting out by what I hear you saying around the first part of September.
Correct.
With that ultimately coming in, being evaluated, and a decision made by the end of October.
Correct.
Are you planning to engage the public in your decision as to what machine to buy?
Yes, Your Honor, we want to do that.
Okay.
I need to get together with purchasing and legal to figure out where the public presentations and the vendors can come in without breaking any procedures on the RFP, on the timing. We can talk to vendors and.
And then the first election that you would envision this equipment being used for would be?
May next year.
May of 2019?
2019, correct.
Okay. That
So,
was going to be my question.
This is my wish list. We can move forward in September with the equipment and continue the discussion of where the vote centers are. The real critical timeline here is deciding by September, okay, we like vote centers. We may still not have the final list in the agreement. You can still approve that at a later time, but we know we're moving to get it done. And we buy equipment that will allow us to do that. And so if you feel that the timeline is tight, we can stretch it out a little bit. What we want to know before September is there any reason we should say we don't want to do this? That's the real question that needs to be answered by September. We can't apply with the SOS for the program probably until February next year. It gives us plenty of time to agree on the list. The state has to approve it, correct. And we can't apply without the equipment because that's part of the application. We have to tell them we're using this equipment and they will say, oh, yeah, that is compliant with the law.
You mentioned earlier that state law prescribes that the number of voting centers in each commissioner precinct has to be equal to one another?
No.
Or balanced?
None can be less than half another. So,
None can be less than half of one of the other.
correct.
Okay.
So if I go back here.
I see, okay. So we have some.
Here we go. So in this example, I started saying, I'm going to have 8 in precinct 3 and 18 in number 1. 8 is less than half of 18, so that wouldn't be acceptable. So by adding 1, now we're in compliance with the law.
Right.
And we're probably talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 300.
250, depending on what reference we take and
Yeah.
how much.
So we're talking about taking the voter turnout and scale the number of access points down to maybe half or 60% or so.
It can be
right?
scaled down to 50%.
So
Yeah.
for example, voter turnout in precinct 3 is about 34%. Voter turnout in precinct 2 is about 25%. And then a little bit less in 1 and 4, right? That's based on historical facts. So if you scale the number of voting centers down, then we have to consider that as well.
That's
So
why
that's-
the
that's- that's why the devil is in the
details.
details.
Right. In choosing the vote centers, my approach to this is I want it to be data-driven and present the CAC and the stakeholders with data that will enable choosing the best locations. I'm going to show you something that is not in the handout you have. I just added it because we were playing with the map. This is an example of the kind of data I want to provide to CAC. It has 2 layers on it. One, we took the 2010 census data and shaded the map with different shades, intensities of yellow, depending on, I think it was the percentage of Hispanic population in the precinct. And the blue one was another variable. And so this kind of analysis will help us detect the list looks good, but when you put it on the map, turns out you have a high interest, you avoided this community unintentionally, but it happens. So you go back and you check, okay, maybe we should add a spot here. Maybe we should add another one. Maybe we have 2 too close. That is how I want to empower the CAC and help them analyze the list that we come up with to say, we believe this is the best list of vote centers.
So the devil can be in the detail, but I think what we all, for the most part, we've always played well in the sandbox.
For the most part.
For the most
You
part.
did remind me that it only took 3 votes to make this thing work. That gives me a
Well,
little bit of heartburn.
Well, let me tell you that. I learned that lesson
Because
my first year on this court.
It lets you reserve the right to screw me if that's what you want to do.
No, we would never do that, Commissioner Brooks. But I think, am I right in, and I mean, we can try to do some stuff between now and September the 4th that could help reassure anyone who's got concerns about that. But at the same time, I really believe that I sense, and I was equally surprised to get both of the party chairs seem to be okay with this. So I hope that we can move forward under this scenario, and if there are things that we need to do in order to be ready to make a decision here on September the 4th.
18th.
Well, okay, 18th. Then, maybe it's to talk and maybe you give us, some, you work with the party chairs,
Correct.
you work with the commissioners
Correct.
to begin to maybe outline where and how those vote centers might divide up. And you mentioned precinct, you mentioned the percentage. What I would also like to look at is how many voting locations does each precinct have now, and how might that work itself out as we move into the reduced number? Because that may be exactly in tie with the percentage, but then again, it might not.
Yeah, we are right now.
I will stay in general supportive of the concept, and I will stay open-minded about its implementation. But I want to see something reasonably concrete before I will be prepared to say yes or no about this.
Thank you. And for what it's worth, Your Honor, last primary during the runoff, we had also a discussion about where parties wanted the polling places, and I think that's a really nice precedent of how we were able to work together and just make sure that both ends of the discussion were satisfied with the list of places we came up with. So I think we have a nice dynamic of how we're working together and finding ways to I don't know if the word's accommodate, but make sure everybody feels
Heidi,
okay with the
be
solutions.
very cognizant of the senior voters, right?
Yes.
That is the voting bloc, okay?
Yes.
And that population is growing at 46%.
Correct.
65 plus.
There's about
right?
4 of us up here.
We've already built a data map.
Right. As we move the voting centers to accommodate the workers, don't
Yes.
forget about the retired. They vote. Yeah. I know my parents, they just like to walk down the block and vote at that elementary school.
And we might just walk downstairs, 4 of us.
And like I said, we're building data that will help us analyze, and 2 of the layers we have is how close you are to the public transportation system and age percentage of each age group in the population of registered voters. So the idea is that when we look at them, if we, for example, feel, we chose a vote center that's too far from a senior dominant community in age, then maybe we got to bring them back up. I'm sorry.
And
I know we're past my 10 minutes. But
the one thing I want to say
is
that we've had the 2 party chairs, and we just had a change. I have been absolutely amazed at how well everybody has worked together. They've just always worked very, very good together, and just can't say enough good things about them. And they continue to do that in this past time. Darrell and Deborah were very, very cooperative as far as working through this process. And I think we'll be very cooperative as we go forward with it.
It speaks of Tanton County.
It really does. It really does. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will accept y'all's assurances.
Your Honor, I just have one announcement before we go into closed. I'd just like to remind the court that we do have a special call meeting on August 6th. I believe it starts at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it is when we will have our budget hearings.
Oh, okay.
Forgot about that.
I appreciate you honoring me on my birthday.
That's the only reason why we're having budget hearings this year, Commissioners Tonner.
Okie dokie.
Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
We will recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempted under section 551.071, 072, 074, 076.
Was to do something about it before it get worse.
But I did. Now
Having returned from our closed meeting, we'll now address the following matter.
Thank you, Judge. The Criminal District Attorney requests approval to submit a proof of claim regarding case number 114 MD-2503 in the United States District Court, District of Massachusetts, for antitrust litigation.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
There being no further business, we stand adjourned.